This thing working. Hey, money's cooking once more. What is good? All right, let's see. Hold on, it's not working. Give me a second. Hey, yo, we about to get it, but hold on. Hey, yo, we're about to get it, but hold up. Hey, yo. Hey. Yo. Yeah. Yeah, we're about to get it, but hold up. Yo, we in here now, so let's get it. I gotta test this. Hello, let's get it. Let's get it.
Your purchase could be free when you use your Credit Karma Visa debit card. Free groceries, free gas, or even a free TV. It's called Instant Karma. And
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. We in the business. Hello. Yeah, this is part 3. I haven't been saying them just because, like, The reason why is because I had to kill off some other things and implant new ideas. So yeah, this is a playthrough part 3, and we're gonna continue butchering some acid. Hold on, I gotta grab. Gotta test this again quick, and I gotta grab a drink. Some drinks. Yeah. Nice. Oh, word, it's working. Alright, we got don't respond. I'm not responding. Let's do it again. Oh, word, it's working. Alright, we got don't respond. Alright, we got an update going on. Good. Yo, we got another viewer on here. Yo, what's good? What's good? What's good? Oh, everything's all good in the hood right now. Word, word. Ah, man. Testing, 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 testing. Alright, well, I'm gonna put something on in the background. Hold on. Some big fire Japanese beats.
I'm gonna put
something on in the background. Hold on. There we go. Yeah, it's working. Some big fire Japanese beats.
I'm gonna put something on in the background.
Yo, talking, again. Working. Yo, talking, again. Working. Ah, man. Yeah. We're gonna have some fire tonight. Get ready. Yeah, we're gonna go over. Hold on. I'll let you know. Basically, we're gonna go over the fucking Beastmen as a whole, and learning about them, because we're gonna know everything when it comes to Warhammer law. We're gonna murder for corn and stack his skull. Yeah.
I've been on the way now.
We're gonna stack that skull throat so high that even Scarbrand will just come kneeling towards us. Okay, we're back. Ready to murk. Let's check out Inept General and see what he has to say for the Beastmen. This was, before Warhammer even dropped, and he made a preview of the Beastmen faction as to all their aspects, their mechanics, the different kinds of units, the lords, what it's all about. So, here we go.
And welcome to my Total War Warhammer Missing Legendary Lords Beastmen edition. And today we are going to be looking at mostly the Legendary Lords from the Beastmen that were included in the 8th edition of the Warhammer game, because that seems to be where Creative Assembly is getting most of their inspiration from for Total War Warhammer. So that's where we're getting the lords from. There may be other characters amongst the Beastmen lore and history that I'm not necessarily including today, but that's just because they haven't been included really in the latest edition, so it seems unlikely at this stage of the development of the Total War Warhammer game that they will be included. But there are a couple of exceptions I've included from earlier editions even, in today's video, and I'll highlight those when we get to them. Let's kick things off, shall we? And we are starting with the one I am most looking forward to, I have to say, Taurox. The Brass Bull, the Slaughter Horn, the Blood Beast. Now, Taurox was a mighty Minotaur chieftain in his own right when people first started to notice him in the Warhammer world. He struck down any foes who faced him. He was notoriously not necessarily vindictive, but angry, and would fell any opponents who would make any form of eye contact with him, which one could equate to some kind of sociopathy or something like that. There's definitely something not right in his head, but if you made any eye contact with his stern visage, he would just strike you down there and then. And this led to him being known for always having blood-soaked feet, whether it be through the blood of his enemies or the blood of his allies. Now, due to this sort of imposing nature and his strength and his ability as a fighter, he very easily...
Huh? Wait, hold on.
And you remind me to give you that card, because I got it to call to see how many Ubers that you get.
Okay.
Let me give you this card now.
Yeah. All right. Yo. Let's get back at it.
managed to impose his will on any other lesser beastmen, thus quickly building up a war herd of his own through which he marched through most of the different areas of the empire. But at some point he tended to find himself in the great forest area of Talabakland, as highlighted here. And he started sort of roaming and reaping and rampaging around this area for a fair amount of time, gathering a war herd to him and challenging any other war herds that stood in opposition to him as well. It got to the point that his rampage of carnage across the great forest had drawn the attention of the Fel powers and the Chaos gods themselves. To this point, they wanted to sort of open up a channel of communication with Taurox, see if they could maybe guide his lust for destruction and murder into a way that would be more useful for them. So one day after a battle, Taurox in
be needing to pick up. Start this
the great forest area of Talabakland, as highlighted here. And he started sort of roaming and reaping and rampaging around this area for a fair amount of time, gathering a war herd to him and challenging any other war herds that stood in opposition to him as well. It got to the point that his rampage of carnage across the great forest had drawn the attention of the Fel powers and the Chaos gods themselves. To this point, they wanted to...
Yeah, no problem. Yo, we're about to get this shit started. Back again, here we go.
To sort of open up a channel of communication with Taurox, see if they could maybe guide his lust for destruction and murder into a way that would be more useful for them. So one day after a battle, Taurox is standing over one of his enemies, and a hand starts to form out of the visceral intestines and blood of one of his fallen foes, and that hand starts to form an arm, and eventually this foul emissary creature made of blood and sinew is crawling out. He started sort of roaming and reaping and rampaging around this area for a fair amount of time, gathering a war herd to him and challenging any other war herds that stood in opposition to him as well. It got to the point that his rampage of carnage across the great forest had drawn the attention of the Fell Powers and the Chaos Gods themselves. To this point, they wanted to sort of open up a channel of communication with Taurox, see if they could maybe guide his lust for destruction and murder into a way that would be more useful for them. So one day after a battle, Taurox is standing over one of his enemies, and a hand starts to form out of the visceral intestines and blood of one of his fallen foes, and that hand starts to form an arm, and eventually this foul emissary creature made of blood and sinew is crawling out of the remains of this body. Now, Taurox, not necessarily being one for words, sort of stands there stoically in silence, watching this happen in front of him. But, much to the emissary's error, as soon as he formed a head and a mouth and was about to open up his proposal to Taurox, he made the mistake of making eye contact. And as soon as he made eye contact, Taurox, with his disorder, where he doesn't like anyone making eye contact with him, immediately attacks, grabs the emissary by the throat, and in one foul swoop, bites off his head. Now, he has his war herd around him at this point, and they're slightly bemused that he, without realizing or interacting with this object, Taurox had bit off its head, and ever since he'd done that, had just stood there as still as a statue, in complete silence, not uttering a word or moving a muscle. And then suddenly, he starts to convulse violently and collapses on the ground. Now, during his convulsions, he's tearing at his own flesh, he's biting himself, and Taurox has a vision, and it's a vision of a world awash with blood and afloat with corpses. Eventually, after sort of tearing at himself and convulsing horribly off his head, and ever since he'd done that, had just stood there as still as a statue, in complete silence, not uttering a word or moving a muscle. And then suddenly, he starts to convulse violently and collapses on the ground. Now, during...
Yeah, after killing him, it just, like, hurt Taurox. It's pretty emo, I have to say. Alright. Well then, let's just get it on. We're gonna get into this fight now. We have to murk these asses, break through this tower, and yeah, unleash our beautiful Jabber Slave. Perfect abomination. Yeah, they might have the numbers, but they don't nearly have enough power. 2 Gorgons now. Check out the links in the Twitch profile. You'll find a lot of bars, Warhammer bars to real bars to dope gaming shit. So y'all don't want to really miss out on that, because this is the Twilight Incredible Starlight. Here comes the Stack Knights, where anything you can fight. See, I'm about to pull up Mario's Wrath, something like. Now I'm gonna switch to the house.
his convulsions, he's tearing at his own flesh, he's biting himself, and Taurox has a vision, and it's a vision of a world awash with blood and afloat with corpses. Eventually, after sort of tearing himself and convulsing horribly, and his warhead gather around him out of concern, he wakes up and just goes crazy. He grabs his two axes, he starts just hacking down his own warhead, hacking down anything near to him. Eventually, after a few hours, he's completely annihilated his entire warhead, killed every single beastman he had gathered under his banner, and his rampage doesn't stop there. He rampages and kills anything he finds. He comes across covens of witches, comes across mercenary ogres, wandering bands of human merchants, just soldiers, troops, anything and everything that happened to cross his path as he was carrying on this rampage around the great forest of Talabaklan was struck down in a very quick succession. After a year and a day, he reaches the small town of Liebstedt. Now in Liebstedt, he kills every single citizen he comes across, and again, it's just continuing this year-long rampage of murder and bloodlust that was driven on by him eating the head of the Fell Powers, this emissary they created to talk to Taurox. So eventually, he killed so many people in this town of Liebstedt that an actual river of blood has started to form at his feet. The blood is just pouring down the main streets of the town, and Taurox is there, and having spent this year rampaging around non-stop, finally his last ounce of energy and life is really spent, and he collapses into the river of blood and sinew, exhausted and dead. The Fell Powers, having very much enjoyed the rampage they've witnessed over the last year, have decided that that's not the end of Taurox. That's not the end of the potential carnage he can reap upon the world. Under the scarlet moon of that evening, they resurrect Taurox, and blood is still flowing from his massacre of the town. He wakes up in the river of blood of his own making with a new brazen metal body, and the gods had blessed him with this new body, a body that would no longer tire, that would never run out of energy, that would allow him to keep killing to his heart's content and give him no respite from his constant state of rage and bloodlust. And as he stood up, he put his hands into the river of blood that he created earlier that day and drank deeply from it. And within his stomach, the pints of blood he consumed began to boil within his metal frame. And soon he had gathered a brand new host to him. His new frame making him a Minotaur of legend, and had obviously had the blessing from the Fell gods, and it wasn't long before he gathered another huge host to him, but this time he obviously had a modicum of self-control and was not just slaughtering them all upon seeing them. He regained some of his mind and was able to think strategically as he had done before eating the head of the emissary. So he's gathered this huge host to him, and at its head are a huge column of armored minotaurs, said to, when in March, spread themselves a mile long. That's how many minotaurs he's called to his new army. And whenever they get the scent of flesh, they are prompted to rush off in a frenzy stampede into that direction, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. They are still in Talabakland at the moment, around the region of the Great Forest, and they've been causing ruin and destruction amongst a number of different settlements. The Empire has sent out some outriders to follow their trail, and the riders, whenever they arrive at a site of this destruction, whether it be a flagellant camp, or a temple to Sigmar, or a temple
Alright, not yet. Well, yeah, he's talking about Taurox, and he's very informative with it. He is explaining Taurox in a very good way. Yeah, he killed the emissary that was sent to him after Taurox killed anything that just looked at him, and he gave him that armor, and wow, he became renowned, like, as the best fucking Minotaur of the business. I don't fuck with him. You know, we're proving that this campaign, man. And, you know, he's going on to say that the visions, you know, are, you know, he saw those visions before he started killing everything when they gave him the armor. And, like, you know, that's what, like, you know, it's like he saw the future because he just ended up. Wait, hold on. Hey, what's up? And yeah, he saw the future, and he did exactly what he saw in the future.
To Ulrich, even they just find blood smears on the walls, no signs of bodies, no signs of anything else. And if their investigation holds true, the trail of destruction seems to signify that Taurox is heading right towards it. And within his
Yeah, we got Mark of the Shadow Cave with us. And he always comes back. So don't you dare. Kill
Taurox wants winners!
Yeah, that army's not gonna be able to get defeated. Work on this. God. Yo, what's up, man? How's it cracking right now, man? Preparing for some serious rampaging. Yeah, I got another Doombo with us too. It's just lights out. The Shadow King. I beat the Sisters of Twilight quite a few times already. And we're gonna be taking now. We should be able to get to the Witchwood. In a short amount of time.
Naggaroth. Cabal.
I'll risk it.
Engrimm Van Horstmann.
I must obey Morgar.
Northmen come. Enter then. Are you after a drink, a fistfight, or both? Bloodthirsty. Enter then. Are you after a drink, a fistfight, or both? Without doubt.
Hold on a second. Let's see what's going on. Crash again. We run it back.
Stomach, the pints of blood he'd consumed began to boil within his metal frame, and soon he had gathered a brand new host to him. His new frame making him a Minotaur of legend, and had obviously had the blessing from the Fell Gods, and it wasn't long before he'd gathered another huge host to him, but this time he obviously had up. He put his hands into the river of blood that he'd created earlier that day and drank deeply from it. And within his stomach, the pints of blood he'd consumed began to boil within his metal frame. And soon he had gathered a brand new host to him. His new frame making him a Minotaur of legend, and had obviously had the blessing from the Fell gods. And it wasn't long before he'd gathered another huge host to him. But this time he obviously had a modicum of self-control and was not just slaughtering them all upon seeing them. He'd regained some of his mind and was able to think.
So he got some control over his bloodlust after he began to start like leading other beastmen into battle, which was pretty dope, yeah.
Strategically as he had done before eating the head of the emissary. So he's gathered this huge host to him, and at its head are a huge column of armored minotaurs, said to, when in march, spread themselves a mile long. That's how many minotaurs he's called to his new army. And whenever they get the scent of flesh, they are prompted to rush off in a frenzy stampede into that direction, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. They are still in Talabakland at the moment, around the region of the Great Forest, and they've been causing ruin and destruction amongst a number of different settlements. The Empire has sent out some outriders to follow their trail, and the riders, whenever they arrive at a site of this destruction, whether it be a flagellant camp or a temple to Sigmar or a temple to Ulrich even, they just find blood smears on the walls, no signs of bodies, no signs of anything else. And if their investigation holds true, the trail of destruction seems to signify that Taurox is heading right towards the capital of Talabheim. This is where he seems to have angled his rage and lust for blood and destruction. Now, Taurox's transformation wasn't...
So Toro's about to lay siege to an Imperial City. We're about to see what goes down. Let me just test this volume. We're good. Load again. Load again. Load again. So testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Little testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Little testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Little testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Build testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Build testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Test that again, test that again, test that again, test that again. 15, 14, 13. 13. Test that again, test that again. 13. Test that again, test that again. 13. Test that again, test that again. R2D2. Test that again, test that again.
Completely finished. He wasn't fully metal. There is a vulnerable point on his throat that can still be struck. So it is still possible to kill him, despite the fact every other sort of inch of his skin is completely made of metal, and thusly has given him a huge amount of armor and made him near indestructible. So that's how Taurox became the roaring, snorting engine of destruction he is today. The sort of grotesque musculature of a Doombull general covered in its metallic skin, leaving him virtually invulnerable, save for the one weakness I mentioned earlier. Now, Taurox himself has 2 horns, obviously, as any Minotaur, but they're bladed at the end. He somehow managed to embed blades into the ends of his horns. His teeth and mouth are also made of metal, and it's become this sort of gnashing metal maw for which he eats things alive and drinks deeply from pools of blood he's created. So essentially, Taurox on Total War Warhammer, I think, would have to be amongst, if not the best melee lord the Beastman can offer. I think he'd need to do more damage than maybe even Kazarak. He'd just need to be a complete engine of destruction. I think if they do introduce Taurox, it will be with the addition of Doombull generals to the Beastman army, which is a type of general they don't have as of yet. And
now whipping work. It's almost loaded up.
Very much looking forward to seeing him in the game. Obviously, he has, in terms of his gear and stuff, he has his brass body, which gives him a crazy amount of armor. He also has his 2 axes, which are known as rune-tortured axes. And these axes have burn on them. They have the ability to burn whoever they strike. They're magic weapons as well. And on the tabletop, you can't make armor saves against his axes. So they'd have to be heavily armor-piercing axes as well. So as you see, with that combination of his kind of strength and armor, he really could be a complete machine. Maybe having a susceptibility to magic, maybe something like that, just to make him not completely OP. But yeah, as I said, on the tabletop, the gap in his brass armor around his throat was actually a weakness. And if you rolled 2 6s on 2 dice in a row when you were looking to hit him, that would actually kill him instantaneously. So I'm not sure if they would find a way of making that mechanic play out in Total War Warhammer. That if some,
I don't think that plays out in Total War Warhammer, but honestly, Taurox is just a tank. I don't think he has many weaknesses. You need the right hero to that with anti-large. I don't know. Maybe another monster will be good against them, maybe his sisters. So I can like stay away from them. Hack him down slowly. Alright, let's end this turn. I'm gonna stay in the game. Make sure it doesn't crash. Oh, nah. Doesn't feel like going. Might be because of like the mods I like added in. So let's do something else. I also just have to redo them again in like a short amount of time. Yeah, doesn't really matter much. Because game's done, so we can just go around to the next campaign. See what we got. Definitely gotta be something evil. I still gotta do Marathi, but then while I'm doing Marathi, I could just do Taurox again. But yeah, I threw in like dynamic garrisons, so it'll be tougher battling settlements. So that could be an issue. Plus, they just updated the game again. Wait, hold on. I gotta see real quick. If they updated any mods. I also started Thoric, and that's been going pretty well. I'm losing settlements, but I have a Dwarven army that just the Dark Elves and the Skaven can't really stop. Ooh, beautiful Marathi, perfect. So I have sexy Marathi back when like she was actually on Ulthuan, but she still looks like a Dark Elf, so she like retained her youth. It's like back in the days when she was like, you know, fucking with Aryan. Alright, cool. So we got that now for this campaign. Cool. Let's see who we should play as. I wonder who we should get. Maybe the Greenskins. I haven't played the Greenskins in a while. Yeah, we could do that. Oh, man. Who's unbelievable? Get my zone. I'm gonna more run this shit myself. I'm a hold anything goes. Some of you never felt like. Whoa. Switching the flow. Gotta get me a new campaign. Because the mods are really dope. They gotta keep updating and fucking me over. It's bullshit. So I keep me like some dope clips. I think I deleted my cloud save. That's fine. I'll get peep this real quick though. Then we'll just go go back to the main menu. It should load fast because it's Vortex. Y'all get a quick peep of like what I'm doing with the dwarves. I just took Chupa Yodel where Lokir Felhart was. And now I'm basically gonna take over Lustria. Skaven basically are taking over everything that I already took over. Now I'm just gonna go back and take them out. So they don't have a strong force whatsoever. Yeah. Alright, let's get in that back on. Hold on. That was a good fight though. So at least we got that dope fight in with Taurox before we get shit kicking off again.
Something very untoward happens, he sort of dies instantly. I don't think that would be fair. That's sort of the aspect of randomness. It's often on the tabletop, but would be hard to incorporate in a Total War game. So essentially, you're just making him a complete monster and melee machine. And that about sums it up for Taurox. He is a great character. He never had a model on the tabletop, so CA are kind of able to do whatever they want in terms of the way they eventually want him to look. But I look forward to seeing what they do. He's also a sort of crowd favorite in the Warhammer communities, so hopefully he will be added one day to Total War Warhammer, and very much looking forward to having a campaign as Taurox, the Brass Bull, the Slaughterhorn, the Blood Beast. Next, we have Gorfor. Gorfor the Cruel, Gorfor the Beast Lord. Now, Gorfor is known as the most famous.
Gorthor is tough, yeah. He was in a mod with he was in this mod called the Glory mod, which was a really dope mod for like new units and shit like that. And Gorthor was like a hero you could pick up, but like a unit. And he was OP as fuck. Like a Wargore on steroids, but not as strong as like a Lord. Like he had his own like bonuses and whatnot.
Of the Beastmen sort of leaders. He was said to have been alive around 1,000 years before the start of Total War Warhammer, during the time of the Crusades. So a number of knightly orders and melee infantry and stuff have all gone south from the Empire and are currently in Araby fighting, leaving the Empire relatively undefended, missing a lot of its best troops. So now Gorfor was a beast lord who inhabited a region of the map known as the Middle Mountain. Now the Middle Mountain on Total War Warhammer is the area of the map where you find Brass Keep and Hockland, really. It's around that Hockland-Ostland area that you often see in Total War Warhammer. So that's the region he's from. He's sort of from that mountain range. And Gorfor was looking to build a beast herd unlike any other that had been seen. And so he started to go about challenging all the other beast lords as soon as he felt strong enough to take them on, and he handily defeated them and killed them and started to gain a huge reputation as the strongest of the beast lords. So, having defeated a number of opposing beastmen lords, he began to amass what was later described as the biggest war herd ever witnessed. He not only slew any opposing lords who stood in his way, but he also committed the sin, and it's regarded as a sort of sin in the beastman world, of killing any Bray shamans who opposed him as well. And he in fact wanted to prove his power so much that even after killing the Bray shamans, he wanted to prove to his other beastmen that he wasn't scared of the notion of the curse that one would come under if one ever killed a Bray shaman, that he in fact wove their pelts together after having skinned them and made them into his own cloak. So he's amassed this huge army, and then he gets about the work of creating an army that can destroy the realms of men. Gorfor at this point believes he is in fact, chosen of the fell lords, the gods of chaos. He will be the vessel with which they destroy the empires of man and return the forest to the control of the beastmen and their kin. To a certain degree, this has proven true, as during some of his battles, a dark aura is known to envelop him and strike out with black lightning, kind of, at any of the foes who try and attack Gorfor. So he has this sort of cloaked magical aura that is brought on by his affiliation with the Chaos Gods. But he's not stupid. This is one of the defining and best aspects of Gorfor, and why he did become one of the Beastmen of Legend, not unlike Kazarak, who is very much an allegory of Gorfor, who's alive today. He's very much known for being sly and cunning and using strategy, whereas the Beastmen in general are usually mindless and just tend to charge at the enemy and not really think too much about it. But Gorfor was very different. He thought about his actions, he planned, he really looked to see himself as the Beast Lord of Beastmen and take down the empires of men once and for all. So he didn't just charge down the mountain as soon as he'd amassed the numbers. He started his war herd for preparing for war. They started to build chariots. They started to bait harpies down and trap them and ensnare them in their armies. Same goes with razorgores. Some say they managed to collect and tame and use razorgores the size of mammoths within their armies.
Check my save battles real quick. I'm gonna get a little peep at that. Word. So you got some dope saves too. They're still gonna be compatible though. No, I got some new mods. Alright, word. I still put some Taurox content up from those. That's dope. Let's see what we can do here. Said the green skins would be dope, Warhammer 3 is coming out. So I played Engrimm once, and yeah, when you do that, it's like getting the books for the Tomb Kings, which grants them their worldwide buffs. So it's pretty cool. More safer sorcerers, of course, because Engrimm is the best sorcerer. Yeah, that's okay. Besides the Lords of Change. So you got hero capacity for chaos sorcerers on key. Okay. Diplomatic relations with the Empire, yeah, because to kind of run through Engrimm's lore real quick, just to sum it up really. He betrayed the Empire. Because he delved a lot into like the lore, he like read a lot of books, and Tzeentch kind of lured him to the Chaos Wastes, and he formed the Cabal, which is like his cult, and definitely it was amazing like, you know, the power he attained after forming such a cult, even before. And yeah, he found the Chaos Dragon Bardros. That's his personal mount. What else? And yeah, he's a real fun time. So with all the hype of the demons coming Warhammer 3, let's get it. Engrimm Van Horstmann. For the change of ways.
Army. He even constructed a chariot for himself because he didn't want anyone else in the battle to be the first one to be able to spill blood. And on his chariot, he often had his sort of servant or ally or friend, even Bagra, who was always accompanying him on the chariot. And you can see him on the model on the left. So once this army's prepared, they've tamed the harpies, they have their massive razor gores, they've recruited gorgons, they've recruited cygors, they have giants. This army is ready to go, and it marches out of the middle mountain into Ostland. And it said that this horde is so vast it stretches from one horizon to the other and starts to terrify the realms of men. Ostland starts to be ravaged. The army set about
Stand strong.
Die well.
it and just completely ruin every town, city, camp of humans they come across. The beastmen eat their fill from the guts and brains of any humans they meet, and go for
and grandsons will lustful desires. Or I think I'll take them. I was like a ripple for a time. But wait, yeah, so I know I played this campaign before, but yeah, now Taurox, Thoric, and that chameleon Oxyodal are part of the campaign now, so we're gonna see what's going on. I think it was SFO and I was Engrimm before too, so I don't think we're gonna be dealing with SFO now. And let me just get one more mic check before we begin. This is a mod, like, for Legendary Lords, so we might as well start a new campaign with that. Yeah, because it's custom, it's going to take a bit to load. Give it a second. Yeah, because it's custom, it's going to take a bit to load. Give it a second.
for himself, always insists on leaving one man alive so that he can go and spread the message of their arrival to the next village, and so on and so forth. So there's this wave of fear that follows this enormous beast herd marching out of the middle mountains. And the slaughter is indiscriminate. He kills women, he kills children. Nothing can seemingly stand in his way. The Count of Ostland is at his last sort of wits. He doesn't know what to do. And at that point, once Gorfor feels he's ravaged Ostland enough and there's nothing really left to ruin, he decides to march the horde south. And at first, it's not immediately obvious where he's heading, apart from into Hochland, and then they realize he's heading straight for the capital. He's going to Hergig. But before he can even set the middle mountains behind him, before they even pass over the horizon, Gorfor is met with a huge army of Black Orcs who are blocking his path. At that point, he has a sort of convulsion. He believes he has a revelation granted to him by the Chaos Gods that this is a test for him. If he truly is to be their chosen, he needs to prove that he can defeat this army of greenskins. And so he sets about trying to destroy this army of greenskins. Now, greenskins versus beastmen, no one's really employing much strategy. So they both rush at each other into this huge melee, just grinding down to slaughter each other. And indeed, Gorfor challenges the Black Orc warlord to a duel. Now, the Black Orc warlord is a towering monster. His name has been forgotten through the annals of time, but it said he towered over even Morgor, who was the largest of the Beast Lords, and they went into and engaged in a furious duel with Morgor's famed spear slashing and darting and diving and twirling, and the Black Orc warlord hacking at him with his axes. And they landed and parried blows off each other that would have sliced any other foe in two with a single strike. It said that this had happening on the battlefield, and their fight got so fierce that everyone had to back up about 20 paces, because if you were anywhere near any of their swinging blades or swinging spear, you were just going to get cut down. It was just that fast, that furious a battle, that furious a duel between the two of them. And finally, Morgor is sort of hit down, and he thinks he's about to lose, and he says he has another vision from the Chaos Gods who tell him, think of this orc as one of the challengers, one of your Beast Lord challengers, and attack him thusly. And this sort of seems to inspire Gorfor, and he stands up renewed with energy and vigor and manages to swing his spear so it slices into the green and pointy ear of the Black Orc warlord and passes through it like butter straight to the other side, even as his scalp starts to slide off the top of his head. The warlord still manages to let out an enormous roar of "Wah!" before he collapses on the floor dead. Morgor then proceeds to trample his body until it's just green pulp under his hooves, and this disheartens the greenskins to such an extent that they just run and scatter. But due to the speed of the beastmen, they run them all down and slaughter them to the last Black Orc, leaving none alive and winning a victory that day. Now, they did suffer some casualties, but just due to the innumerable size of the horde, it really didn't make a difference, and they continued on their march to Hergig. The delay that these Black Orcs caused did allow the humans time to recoup and maybe regroup their forces a little bit. In fact, the Count of Ostland, with his few remaining soldiers he'd had left after the ruination of his province, had the idea to try and reinforce Hochland, and maybe if they stood together, they'd be able to fight off this horde once and for all. But Gorfor, being the sly beast lord that he is, had armies watching the roads, and upon seeing the remnants of Ostland marching towards Hergig, ambushed them and killed every last soldier to the last man, meaning that Hochland was very much on its own and had to defend itself. The Count of Hochland at this time was a man called Michael Lundendorf.
Alright, we're finally about to begin. Sorry about the delay on all the action, but it's gonna be worth it. Definitely gonna have some highlights coming up. Not for nothing, Zeech knows a great secret traded ways ever to see the guide morals long past as increase his own power, showing a favor of those who use cunning and influence to manipulate and control the world and watching and delay its conspiracies unfold. The master of subtlety. His plots are infinitely complex and interwoven. He is the principal architect of secret alliances between his brothers, his brother gods, and also the lord of the grand betrayal. Yep. You got it. Go get it. Well, let's give it a second.
Ludendorff. And he was a ruthless and iron-fisted ruler. He wasn't known for his kindness or generosity, just his stern aspect and forthright nature. And perhaps this is the kind of attitude that was needed to fight a foe of this power and strength. The thing that Mikhail did was immediately he started to ignore the cries from the countrymen, from the farmers and the province as a whole, looking only to enforce and fight from the capital itself. He allowed the slaughter of anyone who didn't get to the capital to go ahead. His
Okay. It finally loaded. Looks like Engrimm 2. Thank God. That was the problem they had last patch.
Siphon power! Destruction for all!
Alright, Engrimm Van Horstmann. You get the little knives, Tzeentch. Chaos Blade of Engrimm. Chaos Steed, Bardros. At level 20. Word. Seek refuge in faith and matters is no longer. Any other place to hide, the reign of chaos has begun. Yeah, I was talking about this. I think it's just came in too. Yeah. Maybe just about like invading Naggaroth, or maybe I was talking about it's fuck up Naggaroth.
Hail the slaughterer! Move!
Fucking up a lot of Naggaroth.
Invade!
Taurox's campaign.
Let's be about this. They will be dominated.
The Cabal. Check that out. For our cults. The majority of the warriors who protect the Cabal are willing slaves to horsemen and apprentices. They are ignorant men desperate for the chance to learn a fraction of the master's skills. Yeah. They're all desperate to learn magical strength. Great Engrimm. And we get aspiring champions straight out. Take that magic now. Okay, so yeah, Engrimm starts with light magic. Well, not light magic, but it's the, actually, no, yeah, that is light magic. Or, that of Amatox really good. I can just stop anything with that. That's a rush. part 3, like if they do a Demon Prince path, I think that would be really dope. Maybe some choice over the Chaos one, you know what I'm saying? Especially since demons are going to be playing such an important
Sole focus was fighting them off at Hergig, and Hergig was the only
the beat first, I guess.
Glorifying act.
Alright, so as Zubor, you have fire, fab, and you'll get a manticore later. Perfect. That was a school warm about Martin Open. Warhammer Fantasy game I played a shit ton of.
No.
Oh man. And that, like, you did get a choice to become like a
Yes, I
demon
ruin
prince.
us power.
Oh, what a cool one. Did we have good core? But you can't sleep on the beach. This scheme magical prowess.
This is wise.
School blast. get more healing earlier. For sure, for sure. Back to that now.
Only place they strategically, from his point of view, stood a chance of defeating this horde. If they met them in the open field, they would just be overwhelmed with the numbers and be slaughtered. In fact, the Count of Ostland, with his few remaining soldiers he'd had left after the ruination of his province, had the idea to try and reinforce Hochland, and maybe if they stood together, they'd be able to fight off this horde once and for all. But Gorfor, being the sly beast lord that he is, had armies watching the roads, and upon seeing the remnants of Ostland marching towards Hergig, ambushed them and killed every last soldier to the last man, meaning that Hochland was very much on its own and had to defend itself. The Count of Hochland at this time was a man called Michael Ludendorff, and he was a ruthless and iron-fisted ruler. He wasn't known for his kindness or generosity, just his stern aspect and forthright nature. And perhaps this is the kind of attitude that was needed to fight a foe of this power and strength. The thing that Michael did was immediately he started to ignore the cries from the countrymen, from the farmers and the province as a whole, looking only to enforce and fight from the capital itself. He allowed the slaughter of anyone who didn't get to the capital to go ahead. His sole focus was fighting them off at Hergig, and Hergig was the only place they strategically, from his point of view, stood a chance of defeating this horde. If they met them in the open field, they would just be overwhelmed with the numbers and be slaughtered indiscriminately. So he sets about the defense. His first order of business is to split his forces, so he has all his foot soldiers and everything else form the defense of Hergig, but he does want to harangue and harass the beastmen as they approach the city. So he sends out all his pistoliers and outriders, not to get caught, but simply ordered to do shooting raids, quick and simple, on your horseback, ride in, shoot some beastmen, ride out, run away, ride in, all the way to harass and harangue the beastmen horde until they got to the capital of Hergig. And in Hergig itself, he had man, woman, and child, citizen and soldier alike, working furiously day and night to enforce the defenses. He had them building weapons, he had them building artillery pieces, he had them building traps and snares that they built around the countryside all around Hergig. They burnt the forest around the town just to make it a clear range of fire for all their artillery pieces and all their archers. Every iron pot, every spare piece of metal they could find and track down was ripped from walls and fences and whatever have you and melted down to build more weapons, more arrowheads, more bolt throwers, all these kind of things to better reinforce the defenses as they stood in Hergig at the moment. So having gone through all these traps, having sort of fought off the pistoliers and the outriders, the horde of Gorfor finally arrives at Hergig. Although they have taken casualties, although the Count had sort of poisoned all the wells and burnt any excess livestock or anything that the beastmen could eat on their approach to Hergig, and they'd lost many to the traps and snares and the bullets from the pistoliers, the horde was still just of such vast size that it seemed a hopeless battle. But nonetheless, the stern aspect of the Count of Hochland stood firm, and he did not balk at the size of the army. And any who tried to run or flee the city, he'd order killed as traitors to the province of Hochland. So, the beastmen set about their business of trying to smash down the gates of Hergig. And it takes them a while, all the traps and all the defenses and all the archers on the walls, and essentially it takes them 3 weeks of fighting until finally a stampede of razorgores, said to be the size of barns, finally managed to breach the gates of Hergig. And as they came in, it caused panic within the city. Citizens were being slaughtered on the streets, but many soldiers and regiments had organized in the larger houses that stood as kind of bastions that they'd managed to barricade themselves in and would fight the beastmen as they ran through their own streets and held out that way. And for 3 nights and 3 days, battling within the city continued. They even managed to hold out in houses, units of halberdiers just barricading doors, stabbing beastmen as they tried to crawl through broken windows and broken doors, and just trying to survive and fight for their lives. So as the fighting in the city continued, Count Mikhail retreated to his palace, and he ordered, and as his forces started to dwindle over the 3 days and 3 nights, he ordered his archers to start shooting flamed arrows into the town of Hergig itself, setting the town ablaze and killing any Hochlanders who'd been sheltering in their basements, trying to escape the ravages of the Beastmen horde, as well as killing huge numbers of the Beastmen in the fire that caught hold of the city itself. In explaining his actions to his fellow soldiers up in the palace, which is where he was now, he said, any Hochlander not up and fighting and cowering in an attic was no Hochlander at all. And that's how he approached that issue. And it did cause huge amounts of casualties to the Beastmen, as well as killing any remaining Hochlander.
This Hochlander was kind of a dick. That's defending right now against Gorthor's enormous Brayherd. Like, he just burnt down all the civilians that didn't make it back to the castle in time. They're just like, yeah, you're just gonna cower away and not fight for Hochland, and you die too.
Who had been cowering in their homes and in their places of business, trying to avoid the Beastmen rampage. Eventually, once the Beastmen were in the city, an advisor to the Count suggested that they surrender. The mere suggestion of this idea made the Council, this had been a long time Counselor of the Count, bear in mind, and some would have thought they were friends, but
Despoilers come. Are you a god?
Unique rights as well. Beautiful. As this next turn comes up, I gotta see what my next book is gonna be.
but caused the Count to
First book.
send this counselor out of his presence, saying, you are more beastman than Hochlander, and you are better off out there with your kind. And he essentially told him to go and surrender himself to Gorthor. Gorthor, looking to take advantage of this little dispute, actually offered the counselor freedom. He said, we'll let you leave, just help us find a way into the palace, which is where the Count had barricaded himself in and had been managing to hold out with the remainder of his forces. The counselor, despite what the Count had done to him, was still a loyal man. The Beastmen rampage. Eventually, once the Beastmen were in the city, an advisor to the Count suggested that they surrender. The mere suggestion of this idea made the counselor, this had been a long time Counselor of the Count, bear in mind, and some would have thought they were friends, but caused the Count to send this counselor out of his presence, saying, you are more beastman than Hochlander, and you are better off out there with your kind. And he essentially told him to go and surrender himself to Gorthor. Gorthor, looking to take advantage of this little dispute, actually offered the counselor freedom. He said, we'll let you leave, just help us find a way into the palace, which is where the Count had barricaded himself in and had been managing to hold out with the remainder of his forces. The Councillor, despite what the Count had done to him, was still a loyal man of Hochland and refused, at which point Gorfor ate him alive there and then on the spot. As Gorfor had managed to whittle down the resistance within the city, he began to gather his war herd at the gates of the palace entrance, prepared to storm it and to finally kill the Count of Hochland, who at this point had enraged him so much, he'd promised his beast herd he wouldn't take any of the humans in the city for himself. They could have everything. All he wanted was the head of the Count. So they've amassed their...
Wow. He just gobbled up that Imperial that wouldn't give Korth. Fool!
You have my faith.
Tzeentch. Let's take the Black Pillar out.
Rabbits, then.
Is it our way?
Asinine mortal. Bring them to ruin! A glorifying act.
Fight him thralls. Oh, that's pretty good. Your spell. None of them haven't talked yet. We need that. You flaming sword of ruin. Peace, but whatever.
Bring death! What? You know these tribesmen hunger for raiding, not talking.
Testing. Testing.
armies, and the sun starts to rise at the end of the third night of their fighting within the city. And as it is, Gorfor starts to order his troops to batter down the gates of the palace. And at this time, the earth around Hergig begins to shake, and the beastmen horde, who are so vast that they are both outside and within the city, start to wonder what's going on. And in fact, over the horizon, as the sun rises, the Knights of the Blazing Sun have arrived. They had word from down in the Crusade, and their entire order had returned north to quell this beastman uprising, and they'd arrived just in the nick of time. And stampeding towards the city of Hergig, they smashed into the rear of the beastman horde, slaughtering thousands upon thousands of them, and coming in to reinforce the city. Gorfor at this point orders his herd to march out of the city, take on these newcomers into the battle.
Yeah, Knights of the Blazing Sun, I'll give them a run for their money. For a little bit. As we approach the Empire now, we're gonna rock them. Oh, look at that, there's the new troglodyte. Skink is always riding them. Yeah, they're like the Spinosaurus of the lizardmen. The Carnosaur being the T-Rex, that's dope, man. So then fucking Oxyodal must be around here. think I'll call it a stream. I got at least 2 more dope battles in. Start this out of myself. Making my progress. Get part 2 in. Echoed Hellbrass. Yeah, it's gonna be part 1 of Engrimm Van Horstmann with a dash of Taurox. Mortal concerns, hold on just for the chaos god and try to ratings and most reward them. Read this enemy, make them die.
Never stop. The gods direct me. Onward to destruction. This is wise.
Is under siege. Too bad for them.
And to kill them all. Seeing his opportunity to surround and to effectively use a hammer and anvil on the armies of the Beastmen, Count Mikael marches out the remainder of his forces as well. As Gorfor finds himself surrounded on both sides by the Count on one side and the returning Knights of the Blazing Sun on the other, he doesn't know what to do. He knows he has to think of a strategy and a way out. And he climbs a sort of broken down statue of the Emperor that had stood in one of the squares of Hergig. And he started to shout towards the heavens, or not the heavens, towards the Chaos Lords, Chaos Gods, saying, "Gods, what shall I do? What action shall I take? Please help me." And he gets a vision and he charges down and he says to his hundreds of bestigors who formed his personal bodyguard that we had to fight our way to the Count. We shall kill the Count and the day will be ours. And they charge to her and the bestigors cart a swathe of bloody retribution towards the Count of Hockland. And finally, Gorfor gets him and meets him and challenges him to a duel, as he had done with the Orc Warlord previously.
Challenge with one of them. Oh good, I was hoping they'd move an army in Argoneth. I need a challenge. Ha ha ha. That's my Japanese beat. They're fucking hard.
And the two of them enter into a fight. Gorfor armed with his spear, the Impaler, the Count with his runefang and shield and old ancestral armor. And they launch into a fierce battle amongst the two of them. The Count fighting off the Beastman Lord who towered several feet above him and rained down blows that would have surely killed any other human. Eventually, Gorfor's fury reached such a zenith that he managed to summon the strength to shatter the Count's shield and rend his ancestral armor in two, skewering him through his torso. In a spate of victory, of sort of drunken bloodlust, Gorfor sets about putting all his strength behind lifting the body of the Count aloft to show it off to his soldiers and hopefully break the morale of the Empire. And he sort of grabbed...
Wow, he kicked the Count's ass. Let me bring that back a little bit. No,
What?
see what this battle's all about.
Greed, mortals will quail. Destroy!
Aha, what are their armies? Well, the spawner should be able to attack straight out. Such a terrible fate to spawn. Definitely a Tzeentchian monster too. Oh yeah, definitely worth fighting. So which elves? That's weird. I'm find a lot of that's pretty fun. They also create sorcerers, master, and let's see. The omnipotent cults. The Cabal. Better know us. Dinner's around. Try to cross the score. Forget about them. Alright, here goes. Try the battle. Go right into it on my mouse. That's by Engrimm's
Off the Beastman Lord, who towered several feet above him and rained down blows that would have surely killed any other human. Eventually, Gorfor's fury reached such a zenith that he managed to summon the strength to shatter the Count's shield and rend his ancestral armor in two, skewering him through his torso. In a spate of victory, of sort of drunken bloodlust, Gorfor sets about putting all his strength behind lifting the body of the Count aloft to show it off to his soldiers and hopefully break the morale of the Empire. And he sort of grabs his pole with the Count on one end and starts to lift it. As he lifts it, the Count's body begins to slide towards Gorfor, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees the Count Runefang lunge at him, seemingly under the guise of its own power rather than the strength of the Count's arm itself. And the Runefang slices Morgul across his chest, wounding him mortally and eagerly drinking up the blood of the Beast Lord itself. And that's where they both met their end, the Count of Hochland and Gorfor face to face, having managed to slay one another. At this point, seeing Gorfor dead completely shatters the morale of any of the remaining Beastmen horde, and they run out of the city. The forces of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, although had caused massive casualties to the Beastmen, them enter into a fight. Gorfor, armed with his spear, the Impaler, the Count with his Runefang and shield and old ancestral armor, and they launch into a fierce battle amongst the two of them. The Count fighting off the Beastman Lord, who towered several feet above him and rained down blows that would have surely killed any other human. Eventually, Gorfor's fury reached such a zenith that he managed to summon the strength to shatter the Count's shield and rend his ancestral armor in two, skewering him through his torso. In a spate of victory, of sort of drunken bloodlust, Gorfor sets about putting all his strength behind lifting the body of the Count aloft to show it off to his soldiers and hopefully break the morale of the Empire. And he sort of grabs his pole with the Count on one end and starts to lift it. As he lifts it, the Count's body begins to slide towards Gorfor, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees the Count Runefang lunge at him, seemingly under the guise of its own power rather than the strength of the Count's arm itself. And the Runefang slices Morgul across his chest, wounding him mortally and eagerly drinking up the blood of the Beast Lord itself. And that's where they both met their end, the Count of Hochland and Gorthor face to face, having managed to slay one another. At this point, seeing Gorthor...
That's crazy. You got into such a crazy duel with this Count, bro. Like, the Count stabbed Gorthor when he raised him up with his hand, as Gorthor had already really fucked up the Count. That's crazy. So they end up killing each other in a draw. Let's continue this story. I don't know if Gorthor dies there, though.
Dead completely shatters the morale of any of the remaining Beastmen horde, and they run out of the city. The forces of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, although had caused massive casualties to the Beastmen just due to their sheer numbers, the fact they had Gorgons, Cygors, giants in their numbers, had also suffered huge defeats, and just with the remaining troops left in Hochland, and even just the remainder of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, they didn't have the numbers to chase down the remainder of the Beastmen horde. But nonetheless, without a leader, the Beastmen horde scattered into disparate tribes and just spread out amongst the Drakwold and amongst the Middle Mountain.
Some of us are born with it, continue to nurture it, and sometimes make
Mountain. And Hochland, although most of the province still ravaged, Hergig had been saved for what was left of it, and the Empire was victorious that day, but suffering heavy losses that have managed to slay one another. At this point, seeing Gorthor dead completely shatters the morale of any of the remaining Beastmen horde, and they run out of the city. The forces of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, although had caused massive casualties to the Beastmen just due to their sheer numbers, the fact they had Gorgons, Cygors, giants in their numbers, had also suffered huge defeats, and just with the remaining troops left in Hochland, and even just the remainder of the Knights of the Blazing Sun, they didn't have the numbers to chase down the remainder of the Beastmen horde. But nonetheless, without a leader, the Beastmen horde scattered into disparate tribes and just spread out amongst the Drakwold and amongst the Middle Mountain. And Hochland, although most of the province still ravaged, Hergig had been saved for what was left of it, and the Empire was victorious that day, but suffering heavy losses that have carved the name of Gorthor into the memories of the citizens of the Empire, as well as carved his names in the immortal hearthstones of the Beastmen for many ages to come. Now, Gorthor himself is armed with, as I mentioned in the story, he has...
Yeah, Gorthor is definitely a legend for that, leading such a enormous war herd. And really just proving he's a top fucking contender. You know, taking on that Black Orc boss. I think that was a really good story. You know, fighting nothing but Black Orcs, him and his herd. You fight nothing but Black Orcs, that's not the easiest fight in the world. Yeah, yo. For Tzeentch. For change.
Tzeentch's many glories! Engrimm Van Horstmann! Tzeentch's many Vanishes perverse glory. Now is our time! Quick! Naggaroth's pestilent glory! They will succumb! Chaos time! Clean magic! Best of chaos! Poor demands! Yes, Lord! The world will scream! Get them! Charge them! Like on top! So be it! Your will! All will be destroyed! Move fast! Bloody glory! Chaos! What? We will! Very good! Yes! What? Change the directors! Naggaroth's glory! The monsters speak! To the foxhole! Yes! Yes! Cool drives us! Chaos gods! Seeds of blood! Chaos gods! Chaos sorcerer! Chaos starts! Now is our time! Destruction! Retreat! Naggaroth! Attack! My time is stopped! Who's best at glory? Time to go! To greatness! Chaos Marauders! Undivided! They will succumb! Seeds of blood! They will succumb! Stop or die! Guard! Here's your throwing action! Only a fool would stay! Hostile! Obey Tonga! First! Scatter this with Asgore! Chaos is strength! Attack the mortals! Chaos Marauders! God's hope! All will be destroyed! Siege! Ah! Quick! What do you mean? We want their eyes! My lord's cold! Chaos! Ruin them! I bring a tempest! If that is your will! Now is our time! Eat your souls! At your command! Balefire! Chaos! Over! Strength is waning! Honor the dark gods!
This is madness!
Reality bends!
The Impaler, his spear, which is a magic weapon and thus would do magical damage. He also has his cloak, which was made of the skin of the Bray shamans he killed, and this gives him essentially a leadership bonus on the tabletop, but maybe it could give him magic resistance or something else like that. in Total War Warhammer. His third item is something called the Skull of Margra, which was a Minotaur Lord. So that's the story of Gorfor. Although this did happen 1,000 years ago, he is in the Beastman. He is included as a named character in the Beastman 8th edition. But I'm not sure if we're likely to see him in Total War Warhammer, simply because he is so similar to Kazarak. And Kazarak is alive in the sort of Total War Warhammer timeline, and his story very much kind of mirrors Gorfor with Kazarak and Boris, and Gorfor and this Count of Hochland, Mikhail. That's kind of the reason I think Gorfor, we might not see Gorfor, although he is praised as one of the most important beastmen to have ever lived, and sort of time and death hasn't stopped them introducing other characters in the past in Total War Warhammer. I just think his similarity as a Beast Lord to Kazarak might mean that we don't necessarily see Gorfor, unlike Taurox the Brass Bull, which is very much a different kind of general. He's a Minotaur general. It's the kind of general we don't already have in the game. So that's my thinking on Gorfor. I think he's quite a cool character. He has quite a cool little story there, and sort of encapsulates the idea of the Beastmen rampaging to end the realm of men, really. So that was Gorfor. Next up, we have Moonclaw, son of Morslib, the lunatic prince, the child of the gravid orb. Now, although he may look like a beastman, Moonclaw is from another place entirely. One dark night on the evening of, I'm going to massacre this pronunciation, but here goes my attempt, Gehimenschnacht, which is a holiday, not really a holiday, a celebration of a time that happens once a year, where the moons of Morslib and Manislib, again, probably butchered that pronunciation, apologies for that, but they're the two moons that exist in the Warhammer world, and it's the evening or the night of them both being at full moon together, and that only happens once a year in the Warhammer world. The two moons both in their full splendor. Morslib hung low, is said to have hung low in the sky that night with a full appearance, full in its firmament, much like one of a pregnant hag, and come at the stroke of the witching hour, a meteor that scarred the heavens with a green flame and sported horns in its front was reported to have crashed down from the sky and landed in the barren hills of Talabakland, and it flattened upon impact. It flattened the forest for miles around, leaving nothing alive except for what crawled out of an egg-shaped meteor that had been made purely from warpstone. Now, warpstone in the Warhammer world, if you don't already know, is essentially pure magic given a physical form. The Skaven, or the Rumoured Ratmen, if you prefer, love warpstone. They use it a lot, but it's essentially magic given magical power, stroke chaos energy, given physical form. And out of this egg of essentially magical power crawled an animal with its fur glistening from being covered in just unknown, horrible, stinking, nameless fluids, and it was so mutated and morphed and disfigured, and it did have horns which made it look slightly like a beastman, but one could barely describe him as such. And this was the birth of Moonclaw. From relatively unknown origins, having fallen from the heavens itself, he spoke in a dark, incomprehensible tongue. When he moved, he cast doppelganger kind of shadows of himself, much like if you ever see in a comic someone moving quickly, but he moves at a normal pace, and it just seems like he kind of multiplies himself through time. His movements are so bizarre. Although no one can really understand what he's saying, through simple gestures and noises, he manages to communicate his will to other beastmen who worship him almost, just due to the dark aura and energy that surrounds him, and the fact wherever he goes, he kind of leaves behind this trail of black and green flame, which the beastmen see as him being blessed by Morsleb the moon itself and by the chaos gods as a whole. In terms of his appearance, he has goat-like eyes, much like other beastmen, but they glow, and he seems to stare into middle nothingness. And one gets the impression he's almost looking, which made it look slightly like a beastman, but one could barely describe him as such. And this was the birth of Moonclaw. From relatively unknown origins, having fallen from the heavens itself, he spoke in a dark, incomprehensible tongue. When he moved, he cast doppelganger kind of shadows of himself, much like if you ever see in a comic someone moving quickly, but he moves at a normal pace, and it just seems like he kind of multiplies himself through time. His movements are so bizarre. Although no one can really understand what he's saying through simple gestures and noises, he manages to communicate his will to other beastmen who worship him almost, just due to the dark aura and energy that surrounds him, and the fact wherever he goes, he kind of leaves behind this trail of black and green flame, which the beastmen see as him being blessed by Morsleb, the moon itself, and by the chaos gods as a whole. In terms of his appearance, he has goat-like eyes, much like other beastmen, but they glow, and he seems to stare into middle nothingness, and one gets the impression he's almost looking into another realm of existence, another state of being. It doesn't really register the world as it is, as we see it around us. Some have suggested he even just sees chaos winds, and that's all he sees. He doesn't really see the physical world as we do. Moonclaw, just due to his very nature, attracts beastmen to follow him, just because he does seem to be blessed by the gods, and does have this mysterious bring, this power, and his sort of skin crackles and glows from the cracks, and it's just very apparent that this is a very powerful, and from the beastman's perspective, he may as well be a beastman. He's a mutant like them, they believe, and so they follow him. It's said that
Yo, let's finish this out right, man. Got this. I got another Dark Elf sorceress coming in. We're about to manipulate her turn her into the chain race. It's a long time last battle. That was really good. That was beautiful. Sparring champion is still pretty good without SFO, but definitely, definitely less armored. I would just say in general, just like not as tanky. But yeah, I have to deal with everything being slow. Just got to custom. It's not vanilla whatsoever, really. It's a whole lot of campaign. So sucks, but yeah. Took a good amount of casualties. The witch elves are pretty annoying with their frenzy, so I'm gonna have to avoid it. I'm thinking by using the Marauder Horsemen, send them out early, and just start hammering away at the Witch Elves, then just send the Chaos Knights around and they can easily take out the Dark Shards. Then everyone else can do their job. Yeah. I think I did do a broadcast with Engrimm Van Horstmann before, so this is like my second time. Yeah. This is gonna be great. Yeah, I know we're gonna be talking about all kinds of different Tzeentchian, ways, as pink horrors, which are like these crazy, like little, crazy looking little monsters with like 5 mouths and eyes, and like the flamers of Tzeentch, the heralds, and we'll talk about their connections to Warhammer 3 and all that type of shit. And we'll get deeper with Engrimm Van Horstmann's lore. All that. We didn't check the book yet, but I believe the book is probably in Naggaroth or somewhere close to it. So that's where I'm going to be getting the first book. And I already have it by the time it's part 2, because I'm going to be making some progress. Because I just have shitty luck with completing campaigns, so I'm gonna just be pushing. By the way, I did drop a fire vid with a Witcher 3 background music with Marathi and Malekith, some dope siege battle action. So y'all should definitely check that out on the game channel. Seraphon just did this funny thing where he like whipped Soul Fit's butt with his tail. It was really funny. Almost like they were having a dragon in a Dark Pegasus 7-6. Fuck! I can't wait to get Marcos, I'll tell you that. So here we go. Enjoy the fight. I'm gonna end it after. So here we go.
Faster, ablaze hunger! So be it! Know it! That is not a moral concern. Yes! Order horsemen! For the Blood God! Faster! Charge! For demand! This world will die! Charge! Take this, mortals! Eat your soul! Slaughter! Chaos Knights! Give us slaughter! Forth! Your will! Charge! Moving! Very good! Going! For order, horsemen! That's what the master's bid! Kill me! Chaos Marauders! Higher the dogs! Kill them all! Turtles, bastard! Eat your swords! Attack the mortals! Gypsy's wound! Ready! The world will scream! Pick up your throwing axes! Attack the mortal! Throw! Putrefaction on them! Vampire! Chaos Knights! All will be disloyal! Chaos Sorcerer! For the Changer! Moving! Going! Not jump! Through the tempest! For your horsemen! Yeah! A fine order! Yes! Your will! Moving! Reality bends! Chaos unites! Move fast! Skulls for the skulls! Move fast! Skulls for the skulls! I am channeling